My in-laws forced me to sign a prenup to protect themselves before the wedding. Now that I'm worth 5x more than them, they want it gone. But when I refused, they claimed I don't love their daughter, and are now pushing her to threaten me with divorce. 8 years ago, my wife and I tied the knot. But before we did, her parents insisted I sign a prenup. At the time, I found it pretty insulting. They'd already made it clear I wasn't really welcome in their family, so the prenup felt like an extra slap in the face. I was in sales when I met my wife. After about a year of dating, I decided to quit and launch my own electronics brand. We were both 27 then, and I was almost 28 by the time I officially started my business. My wife was incredibly supportive throughout it all. She was happiest when I finally began working on my dream. Her parents, though, weren't thrilled. They thought I was living off her money, which was somewhat true. She definitely supported me since I didn't have a steady income, but it wasn't like I was completely relying on her. At 29, I proposed, and we married within a year. A couple of months before the wedding, her parents approached me about the prenup. It stated that in case of divorce, all our assets and money would remain separate. I couldn't claim anything of hers, and vice versa. It also required me to repay my wife and in-laws for their support during my business's early days, as they'd occasionally sent money to my wife to help us out. This felt like an unnecessary reminder that I was indebted to them. I'm pretty sure they included the part about my wife not being able to claim my assets to make it seem fair. The agreement even specified that if we had a joint account, the money would be divided based on who contributed more, assuming my wife would always support me during our marriage. When they presented it, they said signing it was the only way they'd feel secure accepting me as their son-in-law. It was insulting for several reasons. First, they just assumed I'd always rely on my wife and never amount to anything, which was unfair. I was working hard to get my business off the ground so I wouldn't burden anyone. Second, they never liked me, even before I quit my job. From the first time my wife brought me home, they had a problem with me. They didn't think I was good enough for their daughter. By good, I mean rich. My in-laws have a successful real estate firm and come from wealthy backgrounds, so they've always lived comfortably. My parents had normal jobs. My dad was a high school football coach, and my mom managed a coffee shop. I didn't struggle financially growing up, but I certainly didn't have their kind of money. From the beginning, they looked down on me with snarky remarks, mean comments disguised as jokes, and a generally insufferable attitude. I never said a word about it, even though my wife got upset by their behavior. I didn't want them to know they'd gotten under my skin. I believed the best way to deal with them was to ignore them because I knew my wife and I loved each other, and that was enough. We didn't need their approval. So, even when they approached me with the prenup, I felt insulted but signed it. When they took it to my wife, she was offended, but we discussed it, and she signed it without complaint. We both knew exactly what they were trying to do: play games and insult me right before the wedding, hoping I'd back off and they could achieve their goal of sidelining me and getting their daughter with someone more appropriate by their standards. Unfortunately for them, that hasn't happened, and it never will because my wife and I are always on the same team. That was years ago. Since then, my career has progressed significantly. My business grew steadily, then exploded in the last 2 years. All the social media marketing and hard work finally paid off. Whatever it was, something worked greatly in our favor. Now I'm worth almost 5 times more than my in-laws. So of course, they suddenly want to dissolve the prenup. They visited us a couple of days ago. After dinner, once our son was in bed, they had us sit down and told us they'd given it a lot of thought and now believed it was time to talk to their lawyers and dissolve the prenup. My wife looked surprised, and I was pretty taken aback for a moment. Then I declined. I told them to their faces that I didn't think it was necessary, since they themselves had claimed the prenup was the only way they'd feel safe accepting me as their son-in-law, and I didn't want them to lose their safety net. I was obviously being sarcastic, and I guess they picked up on that, even though I tried to sound sincere. They told me several years had passed, we had a son, and they no longer had any doubts about me. But I still declined and told them I wasn't open to discussing it anymore. When I said that, they became agitated and told me it was their idea to have the prenup in the first place, so I should respect their wishes and dissolve it, since they didn't think it was necessary anymore. They also argued that since they were older and more experienced, we should take their advice to avoid any future bitterness. Honestly, I had no idea what they were talking about. After some bickering, I told them I had no interest in discussing the prenup further, and since my wife and I had no plans for divorce, they should drop it too. But they refused to let it go until it turned into a fight, and all the drama we'd swept under the rug for years started coming out. I finally brought up how they had designed the prenup to humiliate me and remind me that I wasn't in the same tax bracket as them. Now that I'd surpassed them, they suddenly wanted to pretend none of that ever happened. Their point was that they only wanted their daughter's future to be secure in case I turned out to be a gold-digging husband who would leech off her, and they wanted her to have a safety net in the prenup. They claimed they were just looking out for their daughter. That went on for a while, and after some time I was too tired to argue anymore, so I told them I was done and wanted them to leave. I thought I was being perfectly reasonable since we were getting too loud and my son was asleep. Besides, it was late, and I just wanted them to go so I could get some sleep and clear my mind. However, they took offense, saying the only reason I was where I am today was because of their daughters and their support. I begged to differ. They never supported me. They only ever supported their daughter. I know I mentioned earlier that they occasionally sent us money while I was working on my business, and I'm grateful for that. But that money wasn't for me. It was for their daughter. We could have easily survived without their help because I had savings. The only times they sent money was when my wife asked for it, specifically for her own purposes when she ran short after household expenses. I had offered to dip into my savings several times, but she told me not to because her parents had the money and wouldn't mind sending it. So technically, they did support us, but only for their daughter's sake. They never had any faith in me. As for emotional support, let's not even go there. They never made me feel like part of the family, and they had no right to tell me I wouldn't have gotten to where I am today without their support. I believe I could have easily done it, and they played no role. So they had no right to throw it in my face like that. When I said that, they started yelling even louder, and the fight escalated because they thought I was ungrateful for telling them they had nothing to do with my success. At one point, they turned to my wife and told her she needed to make a choice now because they had tried to support our relationship for as long as they could. But this was getting out of hand since I refused to acknowledge their contributions. Somehow, my wife managed to convince them to leave, and we haven't spoken since. She has stayed in touch with her parents and has been trying to get them to apologize, even though I've told her I don't need an apology. I just want them to stay away from me. They can visit her freely and have the same relationship with our son, but all I want is space because I'm not interested in repairing my relationship with them right now, especially after everything that happened. The fight had been a long time coming, and honestly, I'm surprised we avoided that kind of emotional confrontation for so many years. But now it's done and I just want to stay away from them. However, I recently learned from my wife that while she was trying to convince them to apologize for treating me badly all these years, they were trying to brainwash her into divorcing me. Last evening, she came to me with her phone and showed me a bunch of messages. She seemed pretty upset because she had been trying really hard to get things back to normal since our son loves his grandparents, and she didn't want things to get weird with the family. Neither did I, to be honest. But after reading those messages, I'm not so sure anymore. They were refusing to acknowledge they had ever treated me badly and acted as if they had every right to treat me the way they did, even if it was humiliating. Not only were they defending their own behavior, but they were also accusing me of being ungrateful for support, which, again, I don't think there was any. They think that's why my wife should rethink her marriage to me and consider a divorce now before it's too late, because I clearly don't love her enough to respect her family. And since I don't want to dissolve the prenup, I'm obviously suspicious of her now that I have money of my own. It's all rubbish they're feeding her to brainwash her into divorcing me. But she isn't buying any of it. She's just exhausted trying to talk sense into them. The only thing she thinks they have a point about is that they did, even if somewhat unwillingly, support us a little financially in our early days when I was working on my business and she was handling all the expenses. However, I don't feel like acknowledging that because it was clearly only because they didn't want to say no to their daughter. It had nothing to do with me. If my wife had allowed me, I would have used my savings to contribute during that time, and we wouldn't have had to rely on them at all. Besides, they always made sure I never felt accepted into the family and treated me like I was with my wife only for the money. so it's not like I didn't face the consequences of that. So, am I the jerk for refusing to be thankful to my in-laws for having supported my wife and me when I was just starting out with my company? Edit. I don't actually have an issue with dissolving the prenup. I just had an issue with the timing of it all because recently my wife and I just made some big purchases for both of us, but they are under my name. It's not a big deal for her, and neither is it for me because I know that we love each other, and we're going to make it work no matter how much we fight. In fact, we are not even fighting right now. It's just her opinion that she has voiced, and I'm considering it. I'm not even outright rejecting it. Divorce is definitely not on the table for us, but I guess my in-laws have been doing some thinking of their own, and that is why they made this decision at this time. It's just the timing that got to me because even now they haven't stopped suspecting me, and they think that they care about my wife and always have their daughter's best interests at heart, but I don't, which is why they always have to put me down. It's very obvious that even now they really haven't accepted me as part of the family, and that's what I have an issue with. As for how much they supported us financially in the beginning, I haven't repaid them, but if they ask for it, then I have no qualms about paying it all back to them. The only reason I haven't offered it myself yet is because I did not think that I owe them that, because as soon as my business started making money, my wife did not have to spend a single dollar out of her own pocket. I've taken great care. And at this point in time, I think we can call it even. Whatever money they have contributed, it had been for their daughter, so it had always been given to her directly, and I had no part to play in it. My wife hasn't had to spend much from some personal expenses since my business started making money, so I think my debt has been repaid in that way. But even after that, if my in-laws think that I should pay them back now, I would gladly do it if that gets them off my back. Update 1. Hi everyone, it's been a week since that fight with my in-laws. From what I've read, people have mixed opinions on my situation, but I've made up my mind. I'm going to return all the money. I have an arbitrary figure, and I'm doing well for myself now, so I don't want to owe them anything. Nor do I want to constantly feel indebted to them forever, and like I need to worship the ground they walk on because of that. I want to be able to stand up for myself without having them throw this in my face. And the only way to deal with this problem is by paying them back all the money they claim to have supported us with in our initial days. I discussed this idea with my wife, and she thinks it's good enough since her parents haven't stopped trying to brainwash her into filing for divorce from me. They think I've disrespected them several times, even though they've never taken into account the fact that they have also disrespected me, and even my family on several occasions. If they can't handle it when I'm treating them the same way they are treating me and my family for years, I don't think they had the right to be dishing it out in the first place either. Besides, I think I was quite polite with them in the beginning before the argument started, and they started bringing up personal stuff and going below the belt. But with them, they have always been outright against me, and have never even pretended that they like me or my family. So I think the way that I behaved with them was quite reasonable after spending so many years suppressing my feelings and trying my best to be respectful of them. Now, by paying back the money, I will owe them absolutely nothing, since they have never supported me emotionally or even pretended like they accept me. Both my wife and I are really exhausted trying to deal with the situation at hand, so we are hoping that writing them a check will solve all our problems. Usually, that's not the way I go in relationships since I know that throwing money at something will not solve the problem, but with them, I think that's the way to go because they are literally that materialistic and selfish. I can't imagine any other parents in the world trying to ruin their own daughter's marriage, especially when a kid is involved, because they think that their own ego is bigger and more important than everything else. It just speaks volumes about how much they actually care for her, and how much they like to pretend they have her best interests at heart. The reality is that the only thing they care about is their image, their ego, and themselves. Update 2. So earlier today my wife spoke to her parents and told them I was ready to write them a check and end this whole situation because it was getting exhausting to deal with, even for her. Since all of this had started because of the money, maybe writing them a check to repay them for everything they had done for us in the past is going to fix things. But, of course, that did not fix anything, and they got offended at the suggestion itself that they could be bought out. They told my wife that this was not about the money, which is strange because from the way that they were behaving the other day while we were fighting, it felt like it was all about the money. However, now all of a sudden, it's about the respect that I have never shown them, which is insane because I can literally claim the same thing for them. My wife and I don't even know what they're talking about because I have always behaved very politely and civil with them. It's they who have always had an attitude with me. I have literally never disrespected them, but they think that this one incident of me refusing to acknowledge them and be thankful for the fact that they have supported us a little bit in the beginning is equal to years and years of them taking advantage of my love for their daughter and constantly trying to instigate me or my family members by being as disrespectful as they possibly can. It is not the same thing at all, and at this point even my wife agrees. They didn't support me as much as they're claiming they did. On top of that, I've already said that I'm going to pay them back, so I won't owe them anything. We don't see where the problem is. If this is going to be about respect instead of money, I really don't think that I owe anything to them for reasons that I have already mentioned. Thankfully, they are not speaking to me at the moment. They are only interacting with their daughter, and my wife is completely on my side. They are still trying to brainwash her into filing for a divorce, and now they started telling her that she needs to start taking our son under her wing and stuff, and I really can't imagine resuming a normal relationship with them after all of this. It's just pathetic that ruining our marriage won't be enough for them. They need my wife to file for custody because of their own ego. I mean, I think this is reason enough for me not to respect them at all because this is the kind of treatment that I've been receiving ever since I met my wife. Update 3. It has been slightly over 2 weeks since that fight with my in-laws. For the past couple of days, my wife has not been responding to them because she thinks it's a lost battle. She had tried her best to explain to her parents why they were wrong, but they kept telling her to file for divorce, and she got tired of trying to fix the situation all by herself. They have made it clear that they were not interested in fixing things anymore, so she had stopped replying to them, and that's why they decided to show up at our house today. I was the one who opened the door to them, and they ignored me and walked straight in and started calling my wife. At this point, I'm not even surprised that they are acting like this after accusing me of being disrespectful to them. They are just hypocrites and they will always be just like this. Anyway, I didn't even say anything. I just kept waiting for my wife to come out, and after a while when she did, she immediately told her parents that she was not interested in speaking to them unless they were ready to acknowledge our side of things. They started telling her that they were only here to confront her about her behavior, because she was going the same way that I did and becoming increasingly disrespectful to them as well. If I was indebted to them, so was she, and she shouldn't forget that. When her parents made that statement, she immediately lost her temper and started shouting at them, and rightfully so. She was their daughter. She hadn't asked them to do anything for her. They had just done stuff for her, and now they did not have the right to hold it against us since it had been done of their free will. If they had wished, they could have easily declined, and we could have still made it work without their help. It's not like other parents don't do stuff like this for their kids, but they do it out of love, not because they want to throw this in their faces later like my in-laws. As for gratitude, we have tried our best to be grateful to them, and show them respect in spite of their ridiculous behavior with me and my family over the past years. Even then, we hadn't said anything and had quietly put up with it because we did not want to create any drama, and wanted to be respectful of them so that the peace of the family was maintained. But at this point it was impossible not to stand up against them, and now they have to realize that they cannot constantly demand to be respected. Sometimes they have to earn it, and this is one of those times. So my wife ended up arguing with them for quite some time, but I said nothing and just stood in the corner because I did not want to interact with them at all. After some time my wife started getting agitated, so I went to her side so I would be able to calm her down, and my in-laws started freaking me out, blaming me for all of this because apparently all of this had started because of my refusal to speak up to dissolve the prenup, and I had to correct them. I told them that this had not started because of that. This had started when they decided that they were going to treat me badly just because I was not from the same circle of rich kids that they had expected their daughter to pick from while choosing a life partner. That's what they were really mad about for all these years, and that's why they had always treated me badly, but I had put up with it simply because I did not want to make a whole thing out of it. However, they couldn't get away with it all the time, and they needed to realize that, which is why I had refused to dissolve the prenup because they need to know that I'm not going to be a puppet for them and do as they say. Things got even more heated after that since now I was also involved, but I did not let them get to me and kept my cool. They kept shouting at me, saying horrible things and cursing me out to make me mad, but I just refused to let them get under my skin because I knew that that's exactly what they wanted, and that made them even more upset. Then they finally realized that they wouldn't be able to get to me, And so they told my wife that she needed to seriously choose between her family and me, and she declared that she was going to choose her family, which meant that she was going to choose her husband and her son. She told her parents to get out of her house and that they were going to be receiving the check soon. After that, we would be done and dusted. Her parents were shocked because they obviously had not expected this reaction from her, and they had probably just believed that they were going to get another chance because that's what usually happens. But honestly, they didn't. My wife and I have had enough, and when they tried to argue after that, my wife told them that she was going to call the police and have them arrested if they did not leave immediately, and they finally left. After that, we blocked them everywhere, and we are finally going to cut them out of our lives. It's going to be hard to explain to our son why he can't see his grandparents anymore, but it's fine. He has another set of grandparents who love him just as much, and maybe in the future we will be able to reconcile, but for now this has to be done. We had tried really hard to make things work with them, but unfortunately it didn't. I don't think they want that. They only want things to work on their terms, and that's not going to be possible anymore. I'm honestly glad that I took a stand for myself, and so did my wife. Some things had to be addressed, and we are very happy that we've dealt with the situation now.